Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, before we get going today, I think a little congratulations are in order. I don't know if you realize this. I just found out last week, I believe, was episode number 300 that we've done. So 300 episodes of this content we've been putting out, trying to help serve leaders. I think I heard that next week we'll hit maybe 200,000 downloads. So we got some people listening here, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. So anyway, congratulations, man. Thanks for continuing to show up here with me and trying to create some content that's going to help people. We talk about this a lot, but what we're doing is really not even about something as much as it is for someone. There are people out there who are listening from those numbers. And I just think about all those leaders, and I know you're passionate about leaders. We both are kind of on the planet to encourage and equip leaders. And a lot of leaders I know who are struggling. And one of the places they're struggling, I'll make a little hard pivot here to our content for the day.
Well, before you hard pivot,
Okay.
Before you hard pivot, I'm excited about the number of episodes and the 200,000 downloads, but I think there's another stat that kind of excites me. Aren't we being listened to in more than 150 countries right now?
Yeah, the last number I saw was 100. I think we're in 151 countries now. So isn't that fun? That's so cool that there are leaders all over the world who are who are trying to get better. And they're listening. So
thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, so much.
All right, make your hard pivot now.
That's good. And well, before I do, I will say this too, for anybody listening, if you've not shared an episode with somebody that's a friend or family member, that's how we spread this. I mean, we're obviously not running ads here or anything. We're just trying to serve in an organic way. And so I'm sure everybody listening today can think of someone who's out there trying to get better and you care about them. I hope you'll share with them. If you've not hit the subscribe button yet or given us a thumbs up, all that stuff, I think that helps it spread from what they tell me, Mark. I don't understand that stuff. Whether you're listening or watching, maybe even on YouTube or I was talking to a leader last week at an event. I did a speaking event, and she said she'd been listening on her podcast, but she said she's been showing the YouTube video to her department once a month, picking out her favorite episode and showing it to her department. And they've been discussing it. So it's a lot of fun to hear some of those stories. So again, congrats, Mark. Fun stuff. Awesome. But one of the things that all these people that are listening keep telling me, and not just them, when we do these events, you hear this over and over, is people are struggling to find and keep talent on their places. A turnover problem. I'll call it problem. It's probably more than a problem. It's a battle at least. Maybe even a lot of people call it the war for talent. Mark, this is so real. And I know you hear this as well. And I'm wondering, are we just doomed to this always be the case? I know the answer to this, but a lot of people are asking me, it's just, we never can find people. We can't find the right people. It's just a part of the struggle that we're in. And so we're going to talk about that today, Mark. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is doable, but it is really hard. I mean, I think it's good to honor that and acknowledge that if you're watching this or listening and you're saying it's hard, you're right. You're not crazy. Well, you may be crazy, but it is hard. But I think we can share some things with you that'll help. That's our goal today.
Yeah. And you mentioned it being hard, Mark. Just think about it. If you do have the wrong people and you're trying to do something and you don't have the people that you need to help you do that, it is hard. It's emotionally hard. It's strategically hard. It's just performance is a mess. It really is hard. So we do want to acknowledge that. I for sure, I'm with you on that. Okay, so here's my question for you today, Mark. Why are you surprised that so many people struggle with this so much? I mean, talk to me about. Yeah, why is this so prevalent?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And I wish I were, but I think the first reason I'm not surprised is that people are just so poorly led. And that's not my opinion. It might be my opinion, but we've got data to support the fact that people are not well led. And that's the first reason that you would think turnover would be high. Let me give you a couple stats. One, Some of you know that Marcus Buckingham, formerly at Gallup, he's now at ADP. He's been tracking engagement in the workforce for years now, well over a decade. And the U.S. number is still hovering around 30%. And the global number of workers engaged in the workplace, like they're showing up and bringing their best, it's still around 15%. And that's mind-boggling to me. So if you're not being well led, of course you're not going to want to hang around. Another stat is from the workers themselves. 40% of frontline supervisors say, unprompted and unaided, that they're not prepared to lead well, which is crazy. These are the people supposed to be doing it going, I'm not prepared. Let me give you one more number. According to Gallup, Marcus's former company, 82% of frontline managers are poor leaders. And I could give you a lot more stats. I mean, there is a global problem with leadership in the workplace. And I think that's the first reason that turnover doesn't surprise me. People want to be well led.
Yeah, and we know when they are, things just get better, and when they're not, we shouldn't really be surprised that performance struggles. And I would say one of the things you said there, that people have never learned really how to lead well. I think that's so true. There's so many people. I'll talk to people that have an MBA, and they're like, the stuff that y'all are talking about, and I say the stuff we are talking about. We do all kind of training and workshops and things to help these companies that really do want to get this right. And it's so fun to go in and do that. But so many times they call us and say, we understand, the widgets we're making or whatever, but nobody ever taught us how to, build a team or lead a meeting or solve problems or, build a leadership culture, some of those fun things that we get to do. And I think there's so much truth to that. It's just, it's hard to teach something if you don't know yourself. I mean, you've never been taught. And so I think that a lot of it is there. But you mentioned engagement. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But I've always heard that people don't leave organizations; they actually leave leaders. And I think there's, that old saying there. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. If our leader is not doing a great job, if we're a highly talented person, we're not going to put up with that for very long, and it's going to be a very short time until we're looking for a new opportunity. Because I don't know very many high performance people who don't want to be well led. It's right. It's so true. So that's a great place to start.
Let me give you one more reason I'm not surprised by high turnover. And you've heard me talk about this before. I know you've actually talked about this. We did a global survey, literally leaders all over the world talking about organizational culture. And you and I believe that is important. Well, guess what? These leaders do as well. About 70% of global leaders say that culture is the number one driver of performance at their disposal. So get your head around that. It's actually 72% in the U.S. say it's the number one driver of performance. We asked those same leaders to rank their priorities. And in the U.S., managing and building culture came in at number 12. Now, you can interpret that a lot of ways, and that's not what we're here to talk about today. But let me say this. Most leaders, the vast majority of leaders, aren't working on their 12th priority. And so what you end up with is not culture by design, but you get culture by default. And cultures by default are not healthy. In fact, they're often toxic, which of course fuels turnover. So yeah, there are any number of reasons. I'm not surprised, but I'm thankful that you and I want to get on the solution side and help leaders say, okay, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be an ongoing, unsolvable problem. It's still going to be challenging, but you can actually tame this beast and actually win the turnover battle.
That's great. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's explore some things that leaders can do. I know we've had a lot of opportunity to learn about this. You've written about it. I've taught about it. I mean, we both have taught so many. I think I've had a chance to talk about talent. To maybe I estimated the other day, it's got to be more than 10,000 people I've had an opportunity to train on this idea, and it really is pervasive. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of people looking for people. So let's talk about
Yeah.
some of the things that we
Well,
can do.
and let me just give a little context on my perspective. Those that may not have been with us before, I spent almost 45 years at Chick-fil-A. I worked on the corporate staff, and I think it presented a great case study because the restaurants, the operators have about 500,000 employees with 100% turnover. So I would consider that a high turnover environment. I know some of you have higher than that, but 100% turnover is a lot of turnover. Contrast that with the corporate staff, who has about a 96% retention rate, and the organization Chick-fil-A is able to retain about 96% of the restaurant operators. So it was in stark contrast that we could look at the principles and practices that led to ultra low turnover here and pretty high turnover here. So I think some of the things we've observed have been from actual firsthand experience with leaders and their teams.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I want to give a little more context there because somebody may be thinking, well, why do you have such high turnover in the restaurant? And this should be pretty obvious, but let me kind of make sure everybody understands. Those Chick-fil-A restaurants, the number I heard is about 80% of those 500,000 employees, so 400,000 of them, really the ones that are turning over year after year, are 16 to 21-year-olds, right? They're either they have
They're
to go
younger
to school.
than that. It's probably 16 to 20, 16 to 19. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
so you're
it's the young
talking about
people.
you're talking about a lot of young people, a lot of teenagers, and I made the soccer team, or I'm trying out for cheerleading, or I've got a math test, and I'm trying to pass this course to get into med school, whatever, and I've got the next 2 months I can't work, and so the turnover. I mean, it would be maddening if you're trying to run one of those restaurants. I'm assuming. I know it's a challenge, but they do such a great job of attracting and really retaining, for the most part, as much as possible, really top people. And I think that's important to say it that way because there are two kinds of talent. We know that you can have even what we would call, well, really, there are probably three kinds. There's top talent, there's typical talent. Those are really good people, but you want the best of the best if you can attract them. And then there are what we would call the C and D players. And I think sometimes organizations, they have an opening, and if they're not careful, they'll just settle for whoever. I had somebody tell me one time, if they can pass a drug test, we'll hire them. And I'm not sure that's really your standard for talent, because we both believe the team with the best talent is positioned to win. So let's think about some of those things that you learned, Mark, when you were doing some of that work back at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, and I think the first I would say kind of dovetails nicely with what you just described, is that you need to staff strategically. And the restaurant operators, you can make the case, have done just that, because they've weighed the cost of turnover with the advantage of having a restaurant staffed with young people. And the majority of those independent business owners have decided, we want to staff with young people. And some of the restaurants have chosen a different approach, and they'll go more for an adult workforce. And guess what? Their turnover is lower. So part of the way you can begin to get your head and your hands around this turnover issue is to think strategically. Maybe some of your turnover is not bad. Maybe in some sectors it would be okay to have more. The Chick-fil-A operator would probably say, you bring a lot of energy, you bring the opportunity for them to recruit their friends, you build connections with the schools. Again, there's a long list, and it probably varies from restaurant to restaurant, but they have chosen a path with higher turnover. Now, I'll quickly say, when you do some of the things that we're going to talk about on the rest of this show, you can even take a high turnover environment like a Chick-fil-A restaurant, and you can cut that turnover in half, because even young people are going to care about some of the things we're going to talk about. But just think strategically. That's a really good place to start getting your head around turnover.
Yeah, that's so great. Okay, so as we continue the conversation here, Mark, I think another thing that's really important is the idea of selecting for fit, to make sure that the people that you choose select that you select, they fit the role that you're going to put them in. And I know sometimes, again, it's almost this warm body kind of mindset. Like, we have a position, we've got to find somebody, and we'd rather have, it filled. Maybe it's not perfect. We'll train them, we'll get them there. And some of that's good. I mean, I'm all for training and people, having an opportunity to move from one position to a next, or, that's great. But I think a lot of times, if we're not careful, we'll try to put somebody in a position that's not their passion area, maybe not their skill set. They're not quite, it's just a little bit of, the old round peg square, or square peg round hole kind of mindset. And I think
Yep.
that's a little bit dangerous. If we're not careful, we can really sabotage our enterprise by doing that. And I tell leaders all the time, I'd rather have nobody than the wrong body in a role. And they, a lot of times they want to throw something at me because it's easy for me to say, I'm going to go back home and I don't have to go back to their place of business where they're trying to get something done. You got to have people. I understand that. And I always remind them, I'm not saying if you got 5 openings that you need to 6 months from now have 5 openings still. You need to fill those positions. But if you're not careful, you'll select somebody that's not really a good fit for that position. And if you do that, now you've got to lead them, and it just makes it worse down the road. So I'm sure you got more you want to say about that, Mark. But to me, I think this is huge, that we make sure that we select for fit.
Right. Select for fit. And I would say at least 2 facets. One, you talked about, which is the fit for the role, but there's also the fit for the culture. We've worked with a lot of businesses that are concerned and focused on improving execution, which you would hope every business would be concerned with execution, right? Delivering what you promised, when you promised, timely fashion, working order, whether it's a product or service. Again, at some level, virtually every organization should be in the execution business. But, there are humans, good people you'd want to hang out with, that don't give a flying flip about execution. And so if you can identify that, and I would argue that you can, if you'll ask behaviorally based interview questions, there are a lot of things you can discern. And so when we were working with some Chick-fil-A restaurants a few years ago, trying to help them improve their execution, some of them actually added that to their selection process, that they were trying to discern, is this the kind of person that's going to care about 2 pickles or 3 if they're small on a sandwich? And you can start with very basic things like people who didn't complete the application but sent it in anyway, right? I mean, that could be a clue. And then there are behavioral questions that you can ask. But I only illustrate or use that to illustrate what is fit for your culture. If you're in the hospitality business, or if that's a focus or a priority for you, I had one leader tell me that he almost selected a person, but in the interview, they stated that the only thing they didn't like about their last job were the customers. They hated the customers. Well, in this leader's infinite wisdom, he didn't select them because he's trying to build a culture that really honors and cares and nurtures the customer. And so fit for role matters, but fit for culture matters too. And when you get the wrong people, you may have to actually ask them to leave. But what's even worse is if you don't ask them to leave and they stay, because then they're working against you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good reminder. I'll actually build on what you're talking about there with the culture. And I think our third thing that we would tell people that are really trying to win this battle is to build a healthy culture. And you alluded to it at the beginning. I think leaders know that culture is important. They told us in that survey you talked about that it's really our number one thing we have at our disposal to drive performance. But again, if it's number 12 on our list, I think they've forgotten that their responsibility as leaders, if you think about it, their stewardship as a leader is to build a healthy culture. And a healthy culture, you'll get to define that if you own a business or you lead a team or whatever. You can define that for yourself. But I mean, we could brush stroke some things here. It's about positivity. I would say that's important. And I've said all the time, you can't go to a positive place with negative people. And if we're not careful, we'll have a culture, we'll allow a little bit of negativity, and that becomes contagious. That's one of the things. I think passion for what we're doing is important. I think buy-in to the vision is important. So anytime we start thinking about the culture, we need to name, you said it in Culture Rules, we need to name what we aspire to, what kind of culture we're trying to build by. Yeah, I like the way you said it earlier. We're trying to design a culture, not let one happen by default. And if anybody's listening here and you've not really taken time to design that culture, you have a culture. You can be certain there is a culture, whether you're working on it or not. And so that might be an opportunity for somebody listening, Mark, to say, am I designing the culture that I want? This building a culture is a really big deal if you're going to attract top talent. I mean, they want to be a part of really, if you want to attract any kind of talent, good or great.
That's what I was going to say. When we did the work for Culture Rules, the book that Randy just referenced, we ended up spending a lot of time and energy talking to top talent, but we also talked to typical talent because we were trying to figure out what are the differentiators, and healthy culture was on the list for both. Mm-hmm. You can't even get typical talent to come and stay if you have a toxic culture. So critical. And let me say, you can be blind to this unless you look yourself in the mirror, and maybe I would say talk to some of the people in your inner circle. I was interviewing a leader one day, and I asked him about this whole idea of turnover and top talent. He says, well, we have a goal to fire somebody every week. And I said, what? Say that again? He said, yeah, I go into every leadership meeting and I say, who'd you fire this week? We're supposed to fire somebody every week. And I'm saying, why do you do that? He said, because we got people we need to fire. And I'm thinking, man, this guy, unbeknownst to him, he thinks he's doing a wonderful thing by holding his leaders accountable to firing people. He's just fueling a toxic, fear-based culture. Yeah. And so you can think you're doing the right thing. Maybe you wouldn't think that's the right thing, but this leader did. And he said, yeah, we try to fire somebody every week. And I'm going, man, that is not the world that I really think you want.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's kind of bizarre.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned earlier, you talked about engagement. I think there's some things we can do we would say increase engagement. That would be one of the things that would be an attractor of top people. Say more about some of the things that we can do. Let's build on that a little bit. I got a couple thoughts. I'm sure you do as well. What do we do if we want to build engagement?
Yeah. Well, just right. Put this in context. We're trying to say you want to try to reduce turnover, assuming you've got some unhealthy and inappropriate turnover. Not the kids that went off to college or went to med school. You need to applaud them and say that's good turnover. But engaged people are more likely to stay. And so you need to be thoughtful. You need to be strategic. I started this episode talking about some of the statistics. If you're like most organizations in the world, you got a lot of opportunity here. And so one of those things is that you need to foster connection with your people, and you need to help your people care. And you want them to care about their work. You want them to care about their coworkers. You want them to care about customers. And you want them to care about the organization. And if you'll foster connection with them as human beings, you got a much better shot at getting all four of those.
Yeah, that's awesome. If I'm connected, in other words, I'm going to care more. I'm going to be more leaned in. I'm going to be more engaged. Here's another one, Mark, I've noticed is that affirmation is a big part of engagement as well. If I feel affirmed by my leader, I'm going to much more likely be leaned into what's going on than I am if I'm just an employee, so to speak. We talk. You said we talk to leaders on both sides, the top talent and the typical talent. And let's give a little more context for that. 7,000 people were a part of that. So this is a lot of people we talked to, and they told us over and over again that I want to be seen as a person as much as I do as an employee, really more than I want to be seen as an employee. And so I'm willing to work hard, to give my best, to do my best. But if I'm just a number and I don't matter, it's going to be a very short time until I'm going to leave. And you said it earlier, sometimes we can even leave and not tell our leader that we left. We're still there taking up the payroll, making a mess of things, and we're really not there. And so if anybody's listening, are your people really with you? If they're not, one of the things that might be missing is affirmation. I think I've said it before, people need to be validated more than they need to be tolerated. I think sometimes as leaders, we have this tendency to just tolerate the people around us. Well, I have to have some people, so it might as well be them. That's a terrible mindset for a leader to have, and people can see that and feel that. And so I think affirmation is another way that we can build engagement. It's just powerful.
Yeah. You'll share one more. How about responsibility? If you'll give people real responsibility at work, their engagement will go up. And I think I can prove it to you. If you just think about a time that someone gave you real responsibility, ask yourself what happened to your level of engagement in that moment. You cared more because you had ownership that came with that responsibility. So if you'll do this, it'll help you retain more of the people on your payroll.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so connection, affirmation, responsibility, some of the things we can do to drive engagement. Let's talk for a second about growth here. We got a couple more before we go. Let's talk about growth. I know you're passionate about growth. I am as well. I think when we provide growth opportunities, this is a huge opportunity for us to reduce turnover. There's a couple of things that happen when we provide growth opportunities. I'm sure you'll have a thought on this. Let me just say this. I think one of the things that happens, I've noticed, is we attract people who want to be a part of a growing environment. But if you start expecting everybody in your environment to grow, it actually makes the current environment better as well. So you don't have to wait for who's coming. You actually can reduce some of the who's leaving if you can just give people a place to grow. Because if I'm growing, I'm typically not leaving. Or if I don't, I'll say it this way: if I don't want to grow, I probably need to be leaving. but if I'm really growing, that's the person you want to stay. And so I think leaders sometimes miss the opportunity to just help people grow, resource them, give them opportunities, give them challenges, stretch assignments, all kind of things are in play there. But there may be some people listening, Mark, who have missed this as a part of their strategy.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add, I agree with everything you said. Just flip it a little bit. It's a retention strategy, but if you start trying to figure out why some of your more talented people are leaving, the research and the data on this is that most of those people are looking for growth opportunities beyond what they believe your organization can provide. And they may be right, they may be wrong, but if you're not focused on it, that makes those really talented people an immediate flight risk if they're not given opportunities to grow.
Yeah. Okay. So we started the episode and we were talking about what why is this happening? What are some of the causes of high turnover? And you started with this idea of people not being led well. I'd love for you to end this today on just maybe with a little challenge, because I think that's the last thing that we can do is lead well. That really is what we have in our control. If we're trying to attract people, keep people. What would you say there to bring us home?
Well, it's what you and I talk about a lot, is that we need to be working to become better leaders. We actually believe it's the first discipline that every leader should pursue as a leader. And that is to become a better leader. It's a lifelong pursuit. And when we're growing, again, first of all, we've got the moral authority to ask others to grow, and they want to be well led. And so as we get better, they're more likely to stay. Remember, the context for this conversation today is how do you reduce turnover? And specifically top talent, not exclusively, but specifically top talent, your A players, they really do demand that they be well led, or they're probably not going to stay with you. So I think my encouragement to all of you is to look yourself in the mirror and say, what's it like to be led by me? What's it like to be led by me? What are your opportunities? What are your gaps? What are the things that you could actually attack from a learning and growing and development perspective that would make you a better leader in 6 months than you are today, better leader in a year than you are today? You really can do this. And let me quickly add one more thing. This isn't just about your skills. In that same survey we've referenced several times, the majority of leaders in the world say the number one impediment to their boss's effectiveness is their ego. And if you'll adopt the posture of a learner, doesn't mean you can solve your ego problems, but as a learner, you're acknowledging there are things you don't know. You do have opportunities for growth. And you want people, when they're talking about you, you're going to have opportunities and you're going to have gaps, but do you really want them to say your number one impediment is your ego? I don't think so.
Yeah. That's a good reminder there to close with. I would say this: there's going to be a temptation if you're listening out there to think, well, I thought you could just buy top talent. I thought you could just pay more. And we didn't really say a lot about this today, but I think everybody really needs to have a fair wage. But it was interesting. Again, we have referenced this survey several times today, but one of the things that top talent told us in that survey, Mark, was that I want to make a difference as much as I want to make a living. I do need to make a living. I do need to be paid fairly, but there's so much more to it than that. And so if you're out there and your turnover is higher than you want it to be, we really do believe that you can lower that just by doing some of the things that we've talked about today. So you may just want to start with one, maybe even just a little self-assessment, like what's going on, and is it me? And once you can answer those questions, then you can start, selecting strategically and for fit and all those things that we talked about today. Make sure you're working on that culture and driving engagement and those things. I think it's something that we have the opportunity to work on continually. It is a battle. It is hard. We acknowledge that. We know that. But I think we all can make progress. We'll do some of the things that we've talked about today. All right, we're going to leave you there. Again, I hope you'll share with somebody. Thanks for being a part of what we've done, and wherever you are in the world, we know you're listening all over the world. We love that. We think that's great. If we can help you out, reach out to us, info@leadeveryday.com, and we'd love to help any way we can. And we got more good stuff coming next week, Mark. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about. It'll be fun. I hope you'll join us for that, everybody. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.